It's time for Triangulation. I'm Leo Laporte, and we have a really interesting fellow. You may not know the name Scott Petry, but you know his work. He was a product manager for this thing at Apple. It's called the Newton. After that, he started a little startup called Postini that solved the spam problem, did such a good job. Google bought it. It's the core of the spam fighting protection in all the G Suite apps. Now he's figured out a way to make the browser safe. Scott Petry next on Triangulation.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Triangulation, episode 423, recorded Friday, November 22nd, 2019. Scott Petry. It's time for Triangulation, the show where we get together with some of the most interesting people in technology, get to pick their brains for an hour. I'm Leo Laporte. Of course, I host this show with my co-hosts Jason Howell and Micah Sargent and Ant Pruitt and Denise Howell. But I said I'm doing this one today because Scott Petry is on the line with us. Now, you may not know the name, but you know Scott's serial startups. Welcome, Scott. It's great to have you on Triangulation.
Thank you, Leo.
Are you I guess you're a serial entrepreneur because
you could say, even if you count the things that didn't quite work out. So yes, I've done a number of startups.
Although I have to say, that's what they say at Silicon Valley. You ain't an entrepreneur till you failed. Yeah, he laughed. That was a very tenuous laugh. Yeah.
Yeah.
First became aware of Scott way back when you were on the Newton team. Look at that.
I was way back when.
What did you do at Newton?
So I joined the Newton team in 1990, just as it was coming out of the Advanced Technology Group. I had been in the Network and Communications Group working on Apple Talk services, which was, as revolutionary as Newton was, I think, with some of the things we were doing down in the protocol and being able to plug resources together. But I was brought into Newton to work on some of the platform capabilities that would allow interconnectivity and more rich computing. So I was working on the Newton 2.0 infrastructure, software and hardware, and that included all kinds of things that allowed the Newton device to connect to networks and connect with services and applications that were richer, and a tablet form factor as well. So I was product manager for the platform.
Wow. Newton got a lot of, mocking in a famous Doonesbury cartoon and so forth. But I have to say, I remember I have 3 of them in front of me, all of which I bought with my own precious dollars. But
thank you.
Oh no, I think I don't think I drank the Kool-Aid. I think I saw the future. And I remember, in fact, there's a clip somewhere of me in 92 or 93 holding up a Newton saying, just imagine if this were connected to this new thing called the internet and it were in your pocket. And I mean, this was the smartphone. It just was a little too early for its time. But I think the DNA of the Newton absolutely persists in the iPhone today.
I think so too, and I think it's. I was really lucky to work with such a group of people that were thinking so forward, and really without, Apple's charm is to think about computing without bounds, without preconceived notions or limitations. It was definitely ahead of its time, but some of the things that were pioneered by the team are things that really did change the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no question about it. And I think that's the great minds will create products that aren't ready for their time.
So you'll like this, Leo. When I was leaving, one of the things that I was working on was, and I left the Newton team in 1993. One of the things that I was working on was a Mosaic browser. So we had a little Gopher client, and we were playing around with Mosaic in order to get to early internet resources over this wonderful thing called the web.
I had my MessagePad 2000, a later Newton, and we were just looking at the PCM CIA cards, and look, in here there's a modem card. It's like a credit card that goes in, and really clever little extension jack so that it didn't stick out from the side of the Newton.
What do you do with that? Do you actually had to plug it? What is that?
What is that? What the hell is that? Show this to anybody under 30 and say, what do you think we did with this thing? What was that? But of course, a telephone cable would go in there, and you'd make it was a modem. But you didn't have. I think that was really the thing that kept the Newton from succeeding, and frankly, also the Palm Pilot and its successors, was you didn't have internet access because the internet really wasn't a big thing yet. It's interesting that you were planning for it, though.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had a model we called client server, and the idea was to make a Newton as a smaller compute platform, a smaller screen real estate, smaller, more limited data input capabilities. How do you further slice the client server model? And we were thinking about reaching all the way through LAN, or what was local area network resources, all the way out into some of the wholesale what came to be internet born resources. So it was really, really fun.
So you've always been a kind of a networking guy.
That's where I started my career. I kind of got into the industry cold as a network administrator, and figured out from there. By the way, kids,
in the late '80s, being a network administrator was a very different job than today, right?
Yeah.
You were crawling on your hands and knees, connecting token ring and
exactly, token ring, or that big thick Ethernet cable.
Remember that?
Before twisted pair. Sure, I do.
Sure, and if you disconnected any one computer because it was a serial network, the whole network went down. Whoops.
But you learn a lot, and you actually had to do things like run ping and poke tools where you would test the integrity of the wire from point A to point B. So like you would own the full stack of what you were responsible for, and then you'd get up into the services. Today it's a lot more abstract, like programming, right? It's become a lot more abstract, and it's great. The services are richer, but learning in those days was it gave you a really good foundation.
It's kind of fun. I often wonder if people who don't have to learn like the 7-layer model and work their way up the stack, if they really...
Does that exist anymore?
No, of course, it's crazy. It's a nut. I mean, it does, right? I think it does. You still have a hardware layer, and you still have all those layers. But as you say, it's kind of virtualized, and nobody is even kind of aware of it, which... I think even then we thought, this will be a great thing. Someday, code will just write itself and nobody will have to. But I also now, in hindsight, I'm thinking, maybe it's not such a great thing because do people even understand? Well, I guess I don't know how my car works either. So that's normal.
It's I think it's probably the same for any sort of technology evolution or technology life cycle, right? It gets richer and it gets more abstract, and old guys like me can always say, you don't remember when
that? Yeah, we used to do that. Yeah. I'm still nostalgic about it, and I like thinking about what an exciting time that was. It felt like something magic was really in the air, especially in Silicon Valley.
It was also a time of optimism.
Yes.
You felt you were shaping something, making things happen. I think now there's a greater degree of, certainly acceptance of the resources and connectivity, sort of a sense of inevitability and also skepticism. But back then it was optimistic. You were shaping this. You were doing something. I mean, Apple's tagline, as soupy as it sounds, was change the world. But you really felt like you were doing it.
Right. I lately spent a lot of time kind of thinking about big tech and not necessarily where we went wrong. The cover of the Sunday Times Magazine this week is the internet is a failure. And it's like, did we go wrong? Or maybe if I take a step back, I think it's just a pendulum swinging that we were maybe over optimistic in those days, and maybe we're now over pessimistic. On balance, the internet is like the real world. It's got good and bad, and it's a mix. And we can't get rid of just, let's stop tech to get rid of the bad, because we're going to lose, I think, some amazing benefits.
Some of the good. Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of what you work on now with Authenticate, isn't it?
It is. It's a great lead-in, because the internet is this wonderful, to say it's wonderfully enabling is like the understatement of the century.
Obviously it also enables propaganda and
it enables propaganda, nasty surveillance by advertisers, people trying to, hold your data hostage, and the root of all evil in that world is really the browser. As great as it was when it was designed, Tim Berners-Lee said it was designed for what he called a safe environment. It was academic researchers on trusted university networks exchanging research information, and the tools, the whole stack was built, from the protocol to the markup language to the web server and the browser, was built with this idea of free-form exchange of information between people that were working on projects and collaborating. But we've seen that openness of the protocols and the entire sort of technology stack be used against us.
In the early days of www, you could, I never was, this wasn't my era, but in Tim Berners-Lee era, you could change anybody's link.
Yeah.
You could edit their document. You could, So imagine going to a webpage saying, oh, that's wrong, and fixing it. I guess that's Wikipedia, but not.
I was going to say, isn't that Wikipedia?
Yeah, but,
that's what they call that now.
Yeah. That went by the wayside pretty darn quickly. So tell me about Authenticate. What is the idea here?
So it's an incredibly simple idea, but it's what we say obvious in hindsight. If you think about what a web browser does, every time you view a page, you go to a destination on the web, you're requesting a big blob of code written by some third party and intermingled with all kinds of other third party code like ad networks or activity trackers or whatever. You suck that down the wire and you bring it into your local computer, and your browser will execute it. It will assemble the page. It will programmatically execute modern usability widgets, scrolling information feeds or pull down menus, watch videos, whatever. All of that is done programmatically at your computer. And we looked at this, coming out of my previous company, we were really looking at this from the perspective of the corporate user and administrators trying to control the environment. And we realized that the protocols aren't going to change. You're not going to be able to embed better security or management into the protocols. You're not going to be able to configure the device because more and more people are moving to a BYOD environment. And this proliferation of cloud-based applications means a lot of times the data that you're trying to control lives on servers that are managed by another third party. And so our whole idea, in simple words, was execute the browser on a server you can control rather than trying to patch all the endpoints all around the endpoints. So we build what's called a cloud browser. You use our browser, it's executing up in the cloud. It's configured with a variety of policies and entitlements and security capabilities, but the user gets basically a real-time display of that browser session to their endpoint.
But it's a harmless stream.
It's
not
an
all
encrypted,
the potential garbage.
That's exactly right.
So this is kind of like what Google's doing with Stadia, Microsoft's doing with xCloud.
It's what OnLive did with games before Stadia came.
The idea is you render the game on the server, and so none of that hard work is done on your computer. And in the case of the internet, none of the security risks are executed on your machine. You just have a stream. Or
the attribution. The attribution is important as well, because if there's somebody tracking you or trying to identify who you are, the IP terminates at Amazon or Google or wherever we're hosting our infrastructure. And so you also get anonymity when you're online. So you're not touching anything, and you're not exposing your IP, your location, or anything like that. But to be fair, virtualization is not new. Virtualization's been around for dozens of years. What we did is used virtualization as a means to an end. The real important stuff I think that we're doing, and the reason the company is called Authenticate and not, jumbo virtualization or something like that, is because we think that the combination of security through this idea of virtualization, identity and access management, or simply said, password management, and data policies gives you this holistic environment for controlling how cloud-based applications are used, particularly sensitive cloud-based applications, banking information, corporate resources, et cetera. You can basically move all of the things that might be exposed either to a malicious person or a user that might make a mistake, and you can put all of the policies to control that in the browser itself. And that allows all of those policies to follow the user regardless of device, regardless of network, regardless of location. The browser becomes the centrally managed asset. Totally secure, totally anonymous, and policy control.
So every time these kinds of things come up, people say, well, wait a minute, that's what we used to have, was this thin client, a terminal, and the computer was over there. And then the whole revolution, the whole personal computer revolution was one desk, one CPU, your own personal little computer that you can do anything.
Decentralized.
Right. And now it sounds like we're going back to the old day of a thin client and all the work being done in the cloud. Is it really regression, or are we making progress?
So I would say you're absolutely right. There are ebbs and flows, centralized to decentralized, right? I would say, though, every time we go through one of those steps on the sine wave, the corresponding services get better.
We learn.
What we're doing, we learn, and the technology gets richer. I mean, what we're doing with the browser is what, a VT100 terminal session was, 25 years ago, right? You have central compute, and the terminal is just a pane of glass. You get a keyboard, you get a display. All the compute is controlled centrally. We're doing exactly the same thing with the browser, with all the entitlements and management, but it's done with this much richer environment rather than, green pixels on a CRT blinking and, typing exotic commands into the keyboard. You get the full WYSIWYG experience. You get the full rich multimedia environment, but it's all done through a virtual, centrally controlled session.
We're talking to Scott Petry. His company, Authenticate. It's authentic with an 8. .com. And the browser, or the cloud browser we're talking about, is called Silo, which is a very apt name. So I'm really intrigued by this, because what it is in a way saying is kind of a new model. Yeah, you have a CPU on your desktop, but that CPU needs to be protected. It needs to be isolated from the outside world in a way that you can use it and trust it and know that there's nobody spying on you. There's nobody looking at what you're doing. Everybody I know tapes over the camera on their laptop. And to me, that's like, if somebody's turning on the camera, you got a bigger problem than seeing you dance in your underwear. That's a Band-Aid on a sucking chest wound. It's not.
You're addressing a symptom, but let me just say that's exactly what's going on with the browser in the corporate environment as well, which is IT is putting Band-Aids all around everywhere but the browser. Better virus detection at the endpoint, deeper analysis of the network, controls at the gateway. But the browser's this wide open application.
Come on in.
Arbitrary. Exactly. Come on in.
And then once you're inside all of those Band-Aids, you're even more embedded. Right.
Yeah. Have at it.
That's a problem people have been complaining about the iPhone. Security researchers don't like the iPhone because it's so locked down. If somebody does infiltrate your iPhone, we'll never know.
Yeah. So, and we live that, right? What we do is we create a hard separation between the web standard protocols and what the user sees. We do a transcoding into a proprietary encrypted non-web protocol that basically paints pixels. We don't have access to, the things. No malicious content can cross over into the other species and touch a local file system hook and, start randomly encrypting files. It's creating this air gap between what the user is doing and what the web is delivering.
It's a really interesting idea. You kind of did this with Postini, right? Your previous startup.
We did. A lot of the thought process around Postini carried over here. And in fact, much of the team here with me at this company comes from Postini. The idea with Postini was equally, I guess you could say, obvious in hindsight, which was mail is becoming this basic corporate right, this basic human right. You need it in order to do your business. And it's based on these wonderfully open protocols, again, that were designed in this academic environment that had no concept of security or data integrity or reputation of the sender. The protocols were designed so that a sender would deliver a mail message to a receiver and it would not get lost. There was no qualitative assessment. It was all based on, quality of service. Our whole idea was to say, what if we sat in the middle, and as the mail was flowing through us, we could open it up and we could analyze the content of the mail message and apply a policy. If this looks like spam, put it in a quarantine. If it's a virus, block it or scan it, and flag it as an infected malware. If it's a message that's sensitive, encrypt it. But we would do that all on the fly in a central, what came to be called the cloud-based resource, rather than having to put all these endpoint solutions in place across all these mail systems. And it was really a perfect model for acquiring, when we sold to Google, we had 11 million users on the system, and we were processing billions of mail messages a day. It just made sense because we wove our way into the standard protocols, but without disrupting the workflows of the user. And that's the same process we wanted to apply to Authenticate.
I'm going to make you feel old now. I'm going to feel old. This is 20 years ago.
I already feel old.
This is 20 years ago when Postini was founded. You sold it to Google in 2007. What part of Google is Postini now? Is it G Suite or is it Gmail?
Yeah.
It's G Suite.
It's we were known for spam blocking and virus blocking, but what we built was really a framework for delivering any kind of application into a mail stream.
Yeah,
As
I always
said,
thought it was like the
encryption.
the stuff that was so great about Gmail was the anti-spam stuff. That's what I thought was Postini, but it's much more than that.
It was much more than that. It was the idea of being able to define how mail should flow for different people. What a human resources team does with email in an organization might be different than what a salesperson does in terms of what they should be allowed to do, how you should monitor their content or restrict, leakage of data, whatever. And so we built this policy framework that would allow in an organization my mail to be processed from a quality, from a approved content, from an encryption, from an archiving, from a spam blocking perspective, to be processed completely differently than you sitting in a cube next to me. Right. And so we built this framework that would allow, it would sync with the directory, and you could define all these policies for how mail should be managed from an application perspective. When Google, we had a lot of security companies that were trying to buy us, the traditional antivirus companies, and they'd say, oh, isn't that a nice anti-spam company over there? Maybe we could tuck that into our solution. What Google was trying to do is trying to sell Gmail into enterprise customers, trying to get people to move from Microsoft Exchange to the G Suite. Back then it was just called Gmail. It wasn't the full set of docs and all of those things. And a lot of the customers that they were talking to had said, we're using this service that lives out on the internet to do a bunch of pre-processing and administration around our email system, and it frees our mail servers from all that work. And so Google came to us and said, could we do an integration? And so we did some simple integration to get our services to live in front of their mail system, because we didn't do anything other than SMTP integration, right, which is the industry standard protocol. And from there, we got deeper and deeper with Google. When they bought us, ultimately they bought us as a solution for provisioning services across mail and other policy-based applications for the entire suite. And so I'm not sure what, I've been out of Google since 2010, so still feeling old over here. I've been out of Google since 2010, so I don't know the state of the art now. But when I left, our infrastructure for security was part of Gmail, of course, but the policy framework was being used as part of the entitlements and monitoring and oversight of the G Suite as well.
So really, in order to solve spam and malware filtering, you solved a much larger problem, really. And Google was able to apply it across the entire.
And the reason is because, spam is subjective. There's 90% of it that's objectively bad, but spam, the read on spam is highly subjective. My favorite story from back when was we would do a lot of customer surveys. We would talk to customers and say, how's the service working? And hey, if you spend 20 minutes with a product marketing person, we'll give you a $50 Amazon gift certificate. And I remember one of these things that sort of became folklore was, one of our marketing people spoke with the customer. They did a 30-minute online interview, over the phone. We sent them the Amazon gift certificate, and that got resubmitted back to us as spam, saying, how did this get through the filter? Somebody from Amazon is spamming me. So the spam question is highly subjective. Yeah. And so what we wanted to do is give administrators or individuals the ability to tune the spam filtering based on their particular sensitivities. An HR team might have a lower threshold for sexually explicit content because they might be working on workplace violations, as an example.
I mean, we could spend a whole show talking about spam. What's interesting is that nobody talks about spam anymore. Back then, it was the number one topic. It was 90% of internet traffic. It still is, but
just go in your spam folder.
We don't see it anymore.
Exactly.
So I think you can say, I'll say it. Thank you, because your concept is victorious. You rerouted. It was my understanding that basically my inbound email, probably with a changed MX record, was routed through you and then back to me. Yeah,
that's exactly right. Yeah, and you would get the good. and we would hold the bad in a big quarantine somewhere else. And I have to say, Leo, it was fantastic from a customer acquisition perspective as well, because we could literally call someone up on a telephone. We did a lot of inside telesales as well as field sales, but we could call someone up on the phone and say, hey, you should try this out. You're processing more than half of your mail traffic as garbage.
Right.
It's costing you money.
Right.
So here's what you do. Change your MX record to this address. 10 minutes TTL? I'll wait. That's fine. Okay. We've set up a service profile for you on our system. Okay. Now look at your mail logs. You're processing 40% of what you were doing before. Now log into this web portal and you can see all the spam that we're quarantining for your organization. Looks good, doesn't it? The guys are, IT is ecstatic. And we say, 30 days, we're going to send you a contract. If you don't sign, we'll turn it off.
And they never let you turn it off. I can guarantee you.
It was great. It was great.
This is really interesting.
Tell me how you positioned for that.
Tell me. So before Gmail, which was really before Postini, I was using a variety of client-based solutions. Like I had Spam Sieve, Michael Size Spam Sieve. We had Bayesian filters. We had keyword monitors. There were all sorts of ways of doing this. And they all were, problematic, both with, lots of spam getting through and worse, in my opinion, and somewhat of a problem still, false positives where stuff that you want goes to spam. That Amazon certificate, for instance, goes to spam. You don't want that. Every time now I sign up for something and they say, okay, we're going to send you a link to verify it, I don't even bother looking in my mailbox. I go to my spam filter because that's where it's going to be, right? Every single time. But that's life. That's fine. We now know. Nobody complains about spam anymore. This was the number one complaint for years. Yeah. So as soon as I started filtering it through Gmail, and by the way, that's all I use Gmail for. I had to go through Gmail and go out of Gmail into my into Fastmail, my IMAP server.
Oh yeah.
My spam went away. Now my sense of it at the time was, well, I thought, and I apologize because I think it was really some more magic from you, but I thought at the time the secret sauce for Google is the collaborative filter, the fact that you've got millions of users who will send you a signal saying, yeah, I got this, and it was spam. Isn't that a big part of it? What did Postini do? Was it Bayesian, the statistically based spam? Was it keywords?
It's a great question, and I won't use any buzzwords like machine learning or artificial intelligence or any of that stuff. But a bunch of those things that we were working on back then were the underpinnings of our technology. There are a couple of things that we had, though, that were, we had hired a couple of PhDs out of a computer science program down in the South, and they were really interested in the problem. So we got to work on, we got real engineers working on the problem. The other thing we did, though, was we built a scoring system. We didn't make a single determination on all messages. Right. We would allow customers to define their sensitivities, and that would give the tool a lot more selectivity in terms of spam for you is not spam for me. And so the team did a really nice job of that, where you could score and then you could interpret the score. And by breaking those apart, you now have a framework that allows you to layer in multiple sequential analysis processes. As we got bigger, we definitely got what you described, which is the network effect. Customer submissions, the issues that a user would flag, things that we missed or things that were falsely quarantined, and we would analyze our collections of those, and then we would retune the framework. We didn't use a Bayesian framework, and for a variety of reasons, but I won't go into the math. It was a little bit more of a pure heuristic system, but it was also a learning system. So we had this analysis of what was being submitted, feeding back into the routines. Then we would test those routines against known corpora and then push those out to the system. The thing that got really interesting, Leo, and this was probably 2002 or 2003, and I think we got a patent around this back then. We built a system that would build real-time IP reputation scores. So it would be not on a per-message basis, but we would look at the composite score of various IPs, and we could look at this matrix of senders and receivers. And where the matrix, where let's say, Bank A is sending email or exchanging email with Bank Z, we could look at some of the attributes associated with those messages messages. And then if we saw similar attributes of that bank one or sender one sending to multiple people, we could say that sender's doing some bad things. And you could start doing wholesale blocks against IPs as these attacks would emerge. And it was more than just spam. It was things like what were called directory harvest attacks. And back then, again, SMTP being such a wonderful protocol, if I connect to a mail server through Telnet session, I can say mail to Leo at twit.tv. And the mail server is going to say, yep, Leo's a good user, or no, he's not.
Right.
And so we saw these attacks where people would extract directory information from the mail server so they could build their spam list. It was crazy. And so we were able to detect those things, like an anomaly where somebody would make 10 requests without ever delivering a payload. That's an indicator that they're doing something nefarious. And so we could then cut off that connection. Since we were the MX front end for the receiver, we could then start to do quality of service to the senders. It was a wonderfully sophisticated system, and it was really, really effective.
So there was a network effect. As
Massive
more people
network
used
effect.
it, the more effective you got. And I have to point out that Hormel used Postini, the creators of spam, the actual pork shoulder.
And one of the conditions, that's funny. I don't know how you find this stuff out, but that's your job. Hell, you showed me a Newton at the start of the show. I don't like.
I got all
someone's
this crap.
doing research.
It's all.
Yeah,
I got
exactly.
it all.
One of the conditions of that contract was we would never spell spam all uppercase in any of our marketing materials, because that's the Hormel trademark.
I was wondering. There is a way around it. Okay, good to know. Lowercase, please. And you could thank Monty Python for the term in the first place.
Absolutely.
So I think amazing. How long did it take before it kind of really started to kick in and you felt like this is actually working? Was it a process?
It was a process. I mean, we were the 8-year overnight success. It was a real grind. You know, it is very hard, especially back then. Think about this, 1999. We're going out raising money with the venture community saying, we're going to build infrastructure out in the internet and corporate customers are going to flow their mail through it. 1999. That was French for will not invest. It was really a grind. We were lucky enough to work with one of our early, the early investor, and we built the infrastructure and did all our proofs of concept. But as entrepreneurs, we're taught, build a better mousetrap and the world will beat a path to your door. It's patently false. Newfound respect for sales and marketing people after starting Postini. Getting in front of the customer with a message that resonates and giving them something they can execute against easily is a really big challenge, especially when you're talking to IT. And so it took us a long time to really crack the nut, to get relevant. I would say, though, the thing, and I don't take this for granted, we built great tech and we made great decisions and we had good marketing. Our sales was effective. But if the spam wave didn't clear that 50% threshold or so, we would still be selling a niche security solution. Yeah. That was a terrific tailwind, because then we could have a conversation with anyone running a mail server and say, more than half of your resources are being wasted.
Yeah. It's interesting to read the articles from that time frame as people started to, I get
nightmares. I won't read it.
No, it's working. Once it started working, it's like, wow, because this was it was a huge burden.
It was huge. Yeah. It was huge. Yeah. And you're right. Nobody even thinks about it anymore.
Not anymore. I don't hear about it at all. So you solved it. Congratulations. Well done. Bravo. Here's the guy. If you can thank Scott, click like or something. I don't know what it is you do these days. But
I don't do that.
Thank you for doing that, because you did eliminate one of the biggest pain points for internet users. And by the way, I should point out, our corporate email is Gmail. We use G Suite here, and we have, 30 seats or something. It's a great thing running in the cloud. A lot of the early pushback, I imagine, was, as you point out, the whole idea of, well, I'm not going to let my precious email sit on somebody's server. You probably get the same objection now about Authenticate. So let's talk about Authenticate, because it's in a way a similar idea. But my first reaction is, well, okay, but all I'm doing is saying, well, I don't have enough secure enough system here. I'm going to let them handle it, and now I'm just kicking the can down the road. I got to trust you.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, if you're connected to the internet, you have to trust someone, right? Are you going to trust your ISP? Or are you going to trust, wherever the mail routes, or the vendor that you're connecting to that might drop a cookie to track you across sites? So if you're going to connect to the internet, you're going to have to trust someone. Privacy is really important to us. And I know it's easy to say, but you can go to authenticate.com/privacy and you can see what our stated position is. And anytime we change anything in our privacy policy, we footnote it and say this is the revision since the last version. So it's sort of a historical walk. Your data is yours. It is not our data. We will not monetize or use your data under any circumstances. What we say is, if the product is free, you're the product. We're not a free product. We are a for-fee service, and so that means it's your data. We will use certain anonymous information in order to maintain a quality service, but we will not access your data or analyze what you're doing without your explicit permission. We even give you the ability to encrypt your data with a public key that you generate and give to us. That way, the burden of...
I like that.
That's right. The burden of proof now, if there is an issue, is on the customer or the owner of the data, rather than us being in a position where we have to editorialize, shall we share or not?
Right.
We really thought through this, and the entire architecture is built on the premise that customer data is the customer's, up to and including the fact if you decide not to use our service anymore, you can export all of your data from our systems without any recourse, without, we'll give you tools to do it yourself, or we will help you do it. We do not want to be in a position where we're holding people hostage with their data.
So I do have data on your servers, on the Authenticate servers.
You can choose to keep data on our servers.
Okay.
At a minimum, we will hold log data of what the web traffic is. But as I said, that can be encrypted with the public key you can control. Anything you do in our system, though, is up to you in terms of how you define the policies. We can do things like two-factor authentication for you and take your cell phone number. If you don't want to have that, you don't need to turn on that feature. Right. We like to have use email address or some other identifying string as a username. If you store profile data in our system, we'll need to have a user account. You don't need to do that. You can use an anonymous string. We don't validate that username in any fashion. So we need a billing contact, obviously. But other than that, you determine what data of yours lives in our system. And it can be, we have organizations that sync with their Active Directory resource. They define policies. They use us for multi-factor authentication. They use us to submit credentials into cloud-based applications so that they get comprehensive management of what users are doing online. We have some customers that say, no, I don't want you to have anything. I'm going to pay for a number of seats and they're going to be anonymous and encrypted. So it's really however the customer wishes to configure the tool.
Did you have to re-architect after GDPR, or were you already?
That's a great question. We did not. We were GDPR compliant out the gate with one, and including the ability to abide by subject access requests, with one exception. We have been a U.S.-based company, so when we store that log information, we were storing that encrypted log data in U.S. data centers, Google Compute, but with GDPR, we now have the ability to cluster in various regions. So it can be GCP in the US, where the encrypted log data is, which would still be GDPR compliant because control of the data is managed by the encryption key. Right. But that's a much longer, access to the data is controlled by the encryption key. That's a much longer discussion. I had a really interesting one in Denmark a couple months ago. It's a hilarious story. But now we can say, no, you want it, if you're in a region like the UK or you're in a region like Central Europe, you can store it in a different region. So we did not re-architect. We had to add a couple of features.
Yeah, that was my next question, is where's your data stored? So if I decided I really wanted to go private, I would generate a key pair, give you the public key. And if you got a subpoena, a warrant, all you could hand over was encrypted data. And this is actually really the way it should be. And if the government wants my information, they have to come to me.
Talk to you. Don't talk to me. Talk to Leo.
As a service provider, that's really what you want.
It's critical.
Yeah.
It's critical. And it's important to us as a vendor, right? That's how we think. We are users of the service, right? That's how we would want the service to work. It's also really important when you talk to a CIO or a CISO of a bank or a law firm or a regulated organization like a healthcare provider. It's really important that you basically show them your attestations and your processes for how you're curating their data. We take so much for granted, up to and including viewing web pages running on the local browser. We want to make sure that customers' data is secure inside of our system and they maintain control.
Are you approved for government use for?
We are. We have about 160 U.S. federal government organizations using us today, and they are using us with our cloud-based infrastructure.
More of them should. Those who aren't really should be.
Absolutely. It's been really refreshing, actually, that the government has been early adopters of the service, because at Postini, when we sold, we had about, 30,000, 40,000 businesses or something ridiculous like that. We did not have a single federal government agency. But here at Authenticate, we've had really good working relationships with various federal organizations, and we have 160 discrete organizations using us for secure browsing.
We're talking to Scott Petry, longtime network guru, was on the Newton team, created Postini, and, well, frankly, solved the spam crisis. Single-handedly.
No. My team's going to kill me.
No. With a bunch of other smart PhDs, ended spam forever. Sold to Google, worked at Google for a while, and left a few years ago to start Authenticate, which is a really, once you hear the idea, you go, oh, that's obvious. Why didn't we think of that before?
That's the maddening thing, right? Because we'll have these conversations with CISOs or CIOs or decision makers, and they'll say, "That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Why doesn't everybody do this?" I'm like, you'll have to ask them.
Right.
We say, Leo, we wanted to have an idea that was obvious in hindsight, and this is really obvious in hindsight.
You did. So instead of running the browser with all its attendant security problems locally on your computer, you run it on Authenticate's servers.
Exactly.
You run the Silo cloud browser, and what you get is a sanitized stream. All the same things. It looks the same, right? Tell me, what do you use? Blink? What do you use? A browser engine? Do I get a choice of browser engine? How does it work?
Yeah. So up in the cloud, we use the Firefox engine, or you can do other things with different infrastructures. But we primarily use the Firefox browser, from the Mozilla Foundation. But then we have an application that runs the conversion into the benign remote display stream, and we will take a flash video and turn it into H.264,
I love it.
or we'll take the JavaScript and we'll wrap it in an RDP with a little refresh framework around it that allows you to interact with those real-time modules. But there's zero web native code that ever touches the endpoint. Every protocol is transcoded. Every bit of data is transcoded into something benign. But to the user, you're welcome to try it. If you go to Authenticate.com and you click the button "Try it now," it'll launch a cloud browser for you, and you can poke around and you can see what your IP is and that it's different than your local computer, and you can check your performance using fast.com. It works like a regular browser. It's just running on our machine, not yours.
And it's running in my browser.
You can run it in. It's displayed in your browser. You can do either way. It's like one of these web conferencing solutions. You can use the local browser, or you can install a little agent and click it.
Wow. But it's not okay. So when I say a stream, I'm in it, right? There we go.
There it is.
Carson's
There's the
doing
browser.
it. He's actually in it. So he's running on his desktop client. He's running Windows, and then that little thing.
Just scroll up and see it's hard to see the whole thing. Just see it says you're fast, you're anonymous. Click that. Go down and click that button.
Yeah, let's
see
what our
anonymous.
IP address is. Yeah, let's see who.
Down below. Scroll down.
See who it thinks we are.
A little bit there, just to the left there.
You're anonymous, right there.
Can't see the whole window, but
look at that. That's not our IP address.
No. So the internet thinks you're a dog.
Well, Carson is a dog, but nobody knows that. Hey, that's really interesting. Wow.
You'll poke around here and you'll run into some of our policy controls. So when we do this, you're basically giving people free access to a browser, and all the coin miners and the click frauders and all that find that stuff. So this is sort of a lockdown version of the browser. You can't go to certain sites. You can't upload or download data from it. We lock it down to protect our demo environment so we don't get hammered with costs, but also to show IT that they can start embedding policies into the browser itself. Yes. And so you can create these different entitlements for the browser. Like, imagine a scenario where you have, we see this a lot, you have a gig economy call center people that are either dealing with trouble tickets from customers or, transcription services or things like that. IT is giving an unknown entity on the other end of an Amazon Turk relationship or something like that access to corporate data. How do you control that? Who knows what device they have? Who knows what they're doing with the account credentials once you give it to them to log into it? With Silo, you can basically provision that user access to a restricted set of capabilities in your applications. You can monitor what they're doing, log it for compliance. And when they leave the project, you can take it away without ever risking leakage, inappropriate access, or them sharing the credentials or getting phished for them.
It's kind of like a VPN a little bit.
It touches VPN. It touches all of the IT blacklist, whitelist, data policy controls like a CASB. It touches SSO or credential management. All of that stuff is baked right into the browser.
Very interesting. Do you cache sites locally, or how do you?
That's a great question. Again, no easy answer. Would you like it to keep your bookmarks? Would you like it to restore the session where you last left off? Or would you like to not? If you don't want to, you don't have to. But if you want us to cache things like the Remember Me cookie for my bank login, or the tabs that I had opened as I was browsing, what's going on in Washington, D.C., we can store all that information. And then when the session starts, and we have a bunch of patents around this, we build a fresh version of the browser, but then we inject the profile, the policy profile for the user. So the user feels like they've picked up where they left off, but all the garbage that was accumulated in the last session is purged.
Wow. So it can be very much like a local browser experience, but it's, of course, protected. It's in effect sandboxed. It's not.
It is sandboxed.
Yeah.
It's sandboxed on our cloud-based resource. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What a great idea. It is what you nailed it when you said it's something that in hindsight you go, oh, that's obvious. But I never thought of it before. Now, you offer this only to enterprise. I think there's probably a lot of people watching say, okay, so how do I sign me up?
We are an equal opportunity provider. So we actually make it available in many instances. We make it available free of charge. We've done a lot of work with journalists that are in sensitive areas. Nice. We do a lot of work with law enforcement that are researching sensitive things, and they need some of this capability. So we are equal opportunity providers. We do make our service available to consumers. They can swipe a credit card and buy. We don't market and promote there because, quite frankly, it's a crowded market and we're still a relatively small company and we're just not tooled that way. But we also sell to corporations, small, medium, large businesses, government entities, et cetera. Where we've found, I'd love to say our vision of replacing the desktop browser is paying off. It's not. It's a big ask to get people to switch their browser or to do something different in the browser. It's a behavioral change. Where we've been really successful is where we found the use cases or the workflows where the current story is insufficient and it can't be secured or it can't be controlled. The Wild West emails that come in, links that come in an email message, kick those off to Silo and those get rendered securely. Or I have somebody that needs access to my financial application, my auditor or something like that. Grant them access inside of Silo so you can control their access to the website. I think over time, though, this is the way things are going. We're going to use virtual infrastructure to maintain an arm's length relationship with the web. It's just a matter of time.
You have to be a little nervous that Google or Microsoft or Amazon might try to do the same thing. I mean, this now that you've let the world know, you have all the patents, you're going to keep it to yourself.
We have 9 patents granted and more in process. We had the same thing with Postini, right? We can't control what Microsoft or Google or any of those other vendors are going to do. We can only focus on how we're executing.
Yep. That's always the problem for any entrepreneur. When you create something, as soon as it goes public, there's a risk. On the other hand, they may just come knocking and say, "Well, we like those patents. You've done that before too." So there could be a happy ending at this. I think this is really
refrain from
cool.
comment.
Refrain from comment.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Does the DoD use this?
Yeah, we have DoD customers. Absolutely.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. We're in use across all 5 service branches.
No kidding. How much does it cost?
It depends. It's on the order of, for a consumer, it's $99 a year. And it's not limited by device or sessions or anything. It's free access to the service. As you get more and more sophisticated administrative capabilities, it's about $150 a user a year. And those are quantity one pricing. When we sell to our largest organization is about 20,000 users, and they're not paying, $150 a user. There's a discount curve.
Speaking as a business owner, that's super reasonable. $150 per user per year is fine. That's considering what we spend on malware mitigation.
That's exactly right.
What we could be spending on ransomware mitigation. All of the security, the Cisco umbrella and the
it's
Sophos
amazing.
UDP and all that.
We just published a case study. We've been working with a command in the United States Navy for 3 years. And we started working with a small group inside of the command, and it was a very successful deployment. And so they said, we're going to turn off the local browser, and we're going to take all of our users on the Nipper terminal. The Nipper terminal is the government computer that connects to the public internet. We're only going to use Silo. That's the way our personnel are going to interact with the internet. They've been a customer of ours for 3 years. There have been 0 security remediation events. There's been zero attribution. There have been 0 attribution incidences.
Wow. Now, this is only a browser. At some point, I'd love to see my whole internet infrastructure running off of this. Is that possible?
It's possible, but the road to hell is paved with virtualization companies doing desktop as a service.
We've
really
seen that, haven't we?
We're really focused. We're really focused on the browser, and when your editor there clicked the browser and it opened a new window and it was fast and it feels like a local browser, that takes a lot of work, and we've optimized around that use case. So that's where we're staying focused.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So what are the downsides? Can I run Netflix on it?
Yeah.
Is Netflix going to say, you mentioned fast.com, but isn't Netflix going to say, well, I don't know what you're doing, but it ain't you?
We don't particularly like that because that's about the most consumptive use case.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
But if you're running the Silverlight movie, it won't work. Anything HTML5 encoded, anything Flash encoded, any 264 stream, that stuff will work.
That makes sense.
It's just another video. Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. And to my browser, what does it appear to be? Is it HTML that my browser is getting with?
It's a great question. Yeah, great question. We'll deliver. I know you've talked about this issue before, but WebAssembly. So a little WebAssembly wrapper that has the interactive framework, and then it's a pixel stream. So we'll deliver that down to the local browser, and the local browser will interpret that and display it. And then we'll be able to track your mouse events and your keyboard input with that little WebAssembly framework that we have embedded in it. And then all of the page content, everything that we do, whether it's a scroll or a mouse over or a click or turn up the volume, whatever, that's all done in a pixel stream. And then we translate that into browser native operations up in the cloud.
One benefit when I think about xCloud, Microsoft's xCloud or Google's Stadia, one benefit is you can do this on slower hardware and get the benefits of fast servers. So that's
exactly right.
Yeah.
You get an economy of scale. I mean, what am I burdening the local device with? I mean, why would I need a gig of RAM to run the browser? I love the local browsers for the consumption metrics, right? You run Activity Monitor and you see how much CPU load, and you see how much. We allow dumb, simple machines to get modern browser environments because all we're doing is piping the display down there.
Yeah.
And if you use our native client instead of the local browser, you get even thinner. You get about 100 megabyte, RAM footprint, and all the compute is shifted off to our network.
What does your native client run on?
The native client runs on Mac, Windows, and Linux, and iOS, iPad.
Be great on a Chromebook.
We work on Chromebook, but through the browser. We don't have through Chrome.
Yeah.
And we have a nice partnership with Google and support the Chromebook nicely. So that's definitely something you'll be hearing more about.
Put a pin.
No, it's nothing spooky.
Put a pin in that one, Karsten. I want to see.
We're a big user of Google Compute. We love the infrastructure.
Right.
They've got global resources that are fantastic for our model, and we're working together with them on a broader partnership that involves a better together story with Chromebooks and such. So nice. We've signed the deal. It's not an announced thing, but it's nothing earth shattering. It's nothing like my previous announcement vis-a-vis Google.
But you do run the whole thing runs on the Google Compute Cloud.
We really like Google Compute. We are cloud agnostic, though. We can run components or pieces of the system in various infrastructures. But Google Compute is where we run a big bulk of our stuff.
Do you do ad blocking or anything like that?
Can do, absolutely can do. Can also turn it off if you want. You want things like script blocking. You want things like user agent string spoofing, whatever. Like anything you can do in the browser, we can do, but we have a policy framework around it that allows you to say, yes, I want to do this, or no, I don't.
So it's all in the control of the IT department.
That's correct.
The administrator gets to choose what you can do.
And it's funny because it's all the things that have been done around the periphery, right? Like whitelist, blacklisting, audit and oversight for compliance requirements, malware protection, all of the things that are useless when the employee goes home, off network, uses a different device. IT is outside of the control. By embedding all those things in the browser, those policies follow the user anywhere they go.
I'm going to give this a try. Try silonow.com if you want to launch the browser and see what it feels like to be running it. Does it feel like a native experience?
If your last mile network is good, it really does. 3-5 megabits, yes. It is a streaming protocol, though, right? So there's
UDP?
No, we basically no.
TCP.
It's not UDP. Well, we call it A8 protocol, and it's delivered over TCP.
Oh, you have your own special thing.
Our own encapsulating protocol.
Nice.
For all the different elements. And that way, that also gives us the ability to define policy traps, right? Like, no, you can't download a binary file. Or yes, you can.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you streamed at UDP, it'd just be
you're just spraying it. Yeah. Now, UDP can be used for some things, like for testing integrity of a network or, checking links and things like that. So I was hasty in my answer, but the primary payload is proto over TCP.
No, you thought. I saw you thinking. So what can it do? Come on, tell me the truth.
We don't support today the WebRTC plugins.
Oh, interesting. And that's becoming more and more popular for things like what we're doing right now. We're using Skype right now, but
I use the Skype app. I use the Zoom.
Skype works. That's fine. But WebRTC is browser-based, so.
WebRTC is browser-based. It's pretty insecure. There's a lot of attribution leakage in that, and we want to be careful with what we plug in so that we don't disclose anything. It's a can do, just don't do yet. Right. But the nice thing about our product is you can have your secure healthcare data in one tab, and your next tab you can have your web-based RTC thing, and there's a hard wall between those tabs because there's no data intermingling.
Right. I like that idea. So you could run a secure tab it's a silo tab.
Oh, 100%.
And then everything else is the same. So if there's something you want to do differently, you can, but that silo tab, you do that where you really want to be secure.
And this is how IT configures us in a lot of instances, where they'll say, I'm going to whitelist these applications, and those are going to be able to run in the local browser, but I'm going to blacklist everything else, and that's going to be rendered in the local browser, but inside of a silo tab.
Perfect way to do that.
Yeah.
So a little bit about authentication, because that's potentially an issue as well. Your IP address now is somebody else, is somewhere out there. Tell me about the authentication piece of this.
Yeah. So there are two ways we think of authentication. One is the user establishing a session with our service in order to get to their browser profile. And then once the browser is open, how does that user authenticate downstream to a downstream web service? Okay?
Yeah.
So The first part, where a user logs in, we can manage machine identification, user identification, integrate with your ADFS system, do a static username and authentication sequence, layer in multi-factor authentication, etc. But we do positive validation of the user before the session is built. And we do it through a number of either bespoke solutions or integrating with the popular IDP, SAML-based IDPs. Once the session is up and you want to log into something like a Gmail or an Amazon or something like that, you can just type the credentials into the browser form because it's a browser.
Right.
Or you can use our product to manage credentials. And those can be managed by an individual user for themselves, or those can be managed by an administrator in a more wholesale manner, and then application access can be provisioned. So we do this with our salespeople. You know, a salesperson joins, they don't get their Salesforce login credentials. They get a Salesforce app provisioned to them inside of Silo. And if they, go home and log in from their home machine, they get a read-only view. They can type data into forms, but they can't copy-paste. They can't download our customer data. And if somebody leaves the team, we have a central place to revoke access. We don't have to worry about they might have their credential on their home machine or their home iPad or something like that. So those credentials can be managed centrally in the browser by an administrator or a user, and then we submit those to the downstream site. We can do that through native form field insertion, like password managers do, or we can do it on behalf of SSO portals that are asserting SAML tokens.
So this is really, from an authentication point of view, a much better solution. Really?
We think so.
Yeah.
We think so. I can literally use your computer to do my work without violating any of my compliance, my IT or my risk management people's compliance issues. Mm-hmm.
So I have obviously I have to have a persistent store on the Silo cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And you just store those, or do you instantiate them? Do you have them?
As you know, we encrypt all that data, and then when the browser session relaunches, you get a fresh browser, and we inject that profile information into the browser session.
You mentioned that, yeah. Mm-hmm. So all the cookies and everything are preserved.
The good cookies, the tasty cookies,
not the bad ones. Yeah, it really bugs me. People hate cookies so much. There's a lot of stuff you need cookies for, and it can be tasty. Yeah. Okay, before we go, Scott, I have to ask you. The chat room is wondering: are you a pilot? It looks like you're in a helicopter right now.
Aren't they great?
They're awesome.
Yeah, these are the best. And I get I'm going to tell my team, stop laughing. These are David Clark helicopter pilot headsets that I've rewired for USB.
Of course you have, because why not?
But they're great. They're super insulating. The microphone is fantastic. So yeah, they're great.
I think we're gonna have to do this from now on. It's not a cheap solution, I would guess.
I'll do them. I'll send you a price quote.
Requires a little soldering. I'm also thinking. Very cool. Scott, it's such a pleasure meeting you, and I feel like I've reconnected with you. We've not met before, though.
Not that I recall, but I've been a long-time lurker. I've really enjoyed watching you over the years and listening to you as well, Leo. So great to meet you in person.
It is one of the, I think, wonderful things about being a geek is when you meet fellow geeks, we have such a shared common history and that you almost, if it's like, well, it's an old friend. So it's nice to meet a brand new old friend. Scott,
same here.
Scott Petry, Authenticate, like authentic with an
authentic 8. With the number 8, yep.
Authenticate.com, but you can also go to trysilonow.com. Mm-hmm. And as he pointed out, we as end users can use it. You can even get an end user account if you choose. Mm-hmm. But obviously the real benefit, and I'm going to go talk to our IT guy right now, a real benefit is to an enterprise. You know, just a couple of weeks ago, after yet another ransomware, attack and a cost of hundreds of millions of dollars to a big corporation. Mm-hmm. I asked my IT guy, what are we doing about ransomware?
Don't say another word, because people are listening.
We are doing stuff, yes. We are doing lots, as it turns out, I'm very happy to say. But I think this would actually, because this is the problem for any business, is your users. They want to sit down at the computer on their desk and use it just like they would at home, doing all the kinds of things they do at home. They plug in their WhatsApp and they plug in their Facebook and they start clicking on links. And honestly, that's
we're taking it for granted. We're taking too much for granted.
We're really, I felt we're walking a tightrope here, and this, as bad as ransomware has been in 2019, we ain't seen nothing.
Yeah. Yet. And those URLs, when they're clicked, it's in a disposable container. It's like rubber gloves for the internet.
What does happen, by the way, if I click a malware URL in Silo?
Nothing. Nothing from a risk perspective. Yeah. We do some in stack analytics and assessment. We call various services, Google Safe Search API. We do some DNS resolutions and all that. But the short answer is you stumble across something. The fallacy of security today is all after the fact. It's all detection. We're prevention. You can detonate that malicious content, and you're in a sacrificial browser. It's never going to touch your system.
He solved spam. Now he's going to solve ransomware with the sacrificial browser. I love it. Scott Petry, such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining us today on Triangulation.
Same here. Thank you very much, Leo.
I'm getting me some of those helicopter headphones. Those look good. Thanks, Scott. We do Triangulation every Friday. Well, usually Friday around 11:30 Pacific. That's 2:30 Eastern time. That's 18:30 UTC. If you're interested in what's going on, just go to our live stream. There's something going on all the time at twit.tv/live, audio or video. So you can stream it at home, stream it in the car, wherever you are. But that's really the live, unedited, unexpurgated version of it. If you want the listen at your own convenience, speed it up 3 times if you want version, you can get that from the website, twit.tv/TRI. Best thing to do, both for me and for you, would be to subscribe and use your favorite podcast application. It doesn't matter. But if you subscribe, that sends them a signal that, this Triangulation must be a good show. And that helps us. And, of course, you don't have to worry about getting Triangulation. You'll just have it available the minute you're in the mood to listen. There's always somebody interesting. We'll see you next time on Triangulation. Bye-bye.